Just do a sound check. Everything good? Perfect. Distinguished guests, colleagues, I want to welcome you to this session of the World Health Summit. The title of this session is Preparing for Future Pandemics, From Fragmentation to Cohesion. The overall theme for the World Health Summit this year is taking responsibility for health in a fragmenting world. As we at CEPI see it, health is security, especially in the current global context. With the plethora of threats that the world faces, from emerging infectious diseases, geopolitical instability, to climate change, and technologies that could be misused with deadly intent, the task for all of us is to protect humanity and defend our way of life. Recent outbreaks of Nipah in India, of chikungunya in the Indian Ocean in the Americas, H5N1 bird flu in the US, and Ebola, and more recently Rift Valley fever in Africa, underscore the fact that infectious disease threats are ever present. They can emerge anywhere at any time from any source. The frightening specter of new AI-generated pathogens only adds to the urgency of being ready to defend ourselves. Less than a month ago, scientists from Stanford, led by Samuel King and Brian He, announced the first viruses designed by artificial intelligence. That should put us all on notice. It speaks to the power of artificial intelligence to bring us tools, but those tools can be misused, and it is critical that we be alert to the changing spectrum of the threats that we face. In this context, pandemic preparedness, in my view, is a core security issue in terms of national security, regional security, and global security. At CEPI, we believe that building security from pandemic threats demands both scientific innovation and global solidarity. Our mission is to make the world safer for everyone, everywhere, by investing in the science and systems needed to swiftly and equitably detect, prevent, and respond to epidemic and pandemic threats. The COVID-19 pandemic taught us that speed and equity must go hand in hand. It is embedded in our 100 Days mission, which aims to develop safe, affordable vaccines within 100 days of identifying a new pandemic threat. Modeling shows that if the world had achieved this during COVID-19, millions more lives could have been saved, especially in lower income countries. Equity is not just a moral imperative, it is a necessity for global health security. Leaving people unprotected anywhere puts us all at risk. To achieve readiness for health security, we must rethink how we mobilize, govern, and allocate our disease defense resources. This means integrating pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response into strategic investments with economic and social co-benefits. It means strengthening capacity and fostering collaboration, including with new partners in finance, technology, and security. That's why I want to acknowledge how significant it is to have Colonel Carlos Peña Gonçalves, who's joining our panel today from the Portuguese military, and he's now an advisor to the Portuguese Medicines Authority. It's a rare and welcome sign that the channels between health and security are opening. The tools and capabilities we build for pandemic preparedness are as much security assets as they are health promotion assets. They protect lives, livelihoods, economies, and stability, and they do so ideally in an equitable way. Obviously, we still need traditional actors in global health. We need all partners, old friends and new, to step up and play a stronger role. We have gathered a marvelous panel today of people with tremendous experience, diverse perspectives, including Dr. Precious Matsoso, Dr. Ibrahima Sosefal, Dr. Florika Fink-Huijer, and Naina Subarwal Batra, each contributing a vital piece to the global effort, showing, and they will show us and talk with us about how when every sector plays its part, globally, regionally, from research to philanthropy, we can truly be better prepared for the next pandemic. Germany, in particular, has shown what it means to lead on science, innovation, with a full commitment to multilateral efforts. Its commission to CEPI's mission since CEPI's founding is a powerful example of the leadership the world needs. Investment in pandemic preparedness is essential to be able to take deadly pandemic threats off the table for everyone for good. Before I welcome our panelists to the stage and have the discussion with them, it's a distinct honor to be able to invite the Honorable Herr Dr. Rolf-Dieter Jungk, the State Secretary of the Federal Ministry of Research, Technology, and Space from Germany, the Bundesministerium für Forschung, Technologie und Raumfahrt. It's my best effort. To give us a keynote speech. So please welcome Dr. Jungk to the stage.
Dear Mr. Hatchett, distinguished representatives from science and politics, ladies and gentlemen. The next pandemic is not a question of it, but when. With these words, WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus issued a stark warning just a few weeks ago. We take this warning seriously. It is a call to action. As climate change reshapes habitats and globalization accelerates the spread of disease, dangerous pathogens can travel faster than ever before. We cannot afford to be caught off guard again. This time, we must be ready. Ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly why we are gathered here today. The COVID pandemic has revealed how vulnerable our societies truly are at these days. At the same time, it has demonstrated that scientific progress and strong international cooperation remain our most powerful tools in the fight against global health crisis. To be better prepared for the next pandemic, we must act now with responsibility, foresight, and a commitment to investing in the future. That is why Germany is increasing its contribution to the Internal Vaccine Initiative CEPI to a total of 100 million euros until 2030. With it, thank you very much. With this step, we are sending a clear signal. We are taking responsibility even in challenging times. We are strengthening global health security and affirming our commitment to science and international cooperation. CEPI, dear Mr. Hatchett, is a true success story. Established in 2017 in response to a severe Ebola outbreak in Africa, the initiative has pursued a clear mission to accelerate vaccine development and deliver them more strategically, so that local outbreaks do not escalate into global crisis. Germany has supported CEPI from the very beginning, investing 519 million euros in total until this year. With the additional funding, we are reaffirming that our partners can continue to rely on us. The results speak for themselves. In 2023, CEPI enabled the world's first vaccine against chikungunya fever, a mosquito-borne disease that, driven by climate change, is increasingly emerging in Europe. During the COVID pandemic, CEPI also contributed to the development of 4 vaccines approved in the EU. This achievement demonstrates that CEPI is successfully and that our commitment saves lives. CEPI focuses not only on known threats, but also on emerging pathogens. Through its 100 Days mission, the initiative aims to develop a vaccine candidate within 100 days of a new pathogen's emergence. 100 days, ambitious, yes, but achievable. And it is urgently needed. The faster we act, the greater our chances of containing an epidemic at its outset. This is exactly the goal of our support. We are investing in platform technologies, vaccine libraries, and international research networks to ensure rapid and effective responses. But speed alone is not enough. Equally important is ensuring that vaccines are distributed fairly. CEPI is committed to guaranteeing global access, a vision we share. New vaccines must not be a privilege reserved for wealthy countries. Diseases know no borders. An outbreak anywhere in the world poses a threat to everyone. That is why research and solidarity must go hand in hand. Progress always comes through cooperation, through the exchange of knowledge, the removal of barriers, and a shared sense of responsibility. Pandemic prevention is not a national task, but a global challenge. That is why Germany consistently invests in international networks. For example, we support the One Health approach, which highlights the close interconnection between human, animal, and environmental health, as well as Horizon Europe, the EU Research Framework Programme, which promotes innovation in pandemic preparedness and vaccine research. We also participate in initiatives such as CARB-X and product development partnerships like GARD-P, which develop new antibiotics, vaccines, and diagnostics to combat antimicrobial resistance, one of the greatest health threats of our times. Every year, millions of people die from infections that can no longer be treated with existing drugs. Our commitment helps close this gap and ensures effective therapies for future generations. At the same time, we are contributing directly to Germany's high-tech agenda. Our goal is to translate innovation into practice as quickly as possible by strengthening international collaborations such as CEPI, product development partnerships, and the One Health approach. We achieve 2 goals at once: protecting global health while advancing key technologies such as biotechnology and artificial intelligence that are essential for the medicine of the future. Ladies and gentlemen, the 100 million euros we are pledging today are far more than just a number. We are investing in CEPI now to ensure that we are better protected tomorrow. Only together can we safeguard global health, prevent future pandemics, and strengthen the resilience of our societies. Let us continue our joint efforts. Germany is doing its part, but CEPI can only reach its full potential if all partners work together. Our goal is clear: to build a global protective shield that encompasses all regions and all people. Let us move forward together, mindful of our responsibility and confident in the power of science. Thank you very much for your attention.
State Secretary, Dr. Jungk, thank you for that tremendous display of commitment It is incredibly meaningful for CEPI. It sends a strong signal to our other partners to sustain their support. We look forward to working with our German colleagues, the German government, our German institutional partners, our German scientific partners, to make that vision that you just described a reality. Thank you very much. Let us thank the State Secretary again. I know the State Secretary has other commitments and is going to need to step out shortly, but it's really been an honor. Thank you for coming. Thank you for that tremendous contribution. So with that, I would like to go ahead and invite our panelists to come to the stage, and I'll introduce you once you're seated. But as I said, we have a tremendous panel, very distinguished speakers with a deep depth and variety of experiences, and we'll go ahead and get started. And so let me start at the opposite end and introduce Nayana Subbarwal-Batra, who's the CEO of AVPN, which I think once upon a time stood for Asian Venture Philanthropy Network, I'm guessing.
That's correct, yeah.
But now is like Gavi, is just AVPN.
It is.
Because AVPN has grown, and it has moved beyond just supporting catalytic philanthropies. It has impact investors, corporate CSR, and brings others together to support global health efforts, and look forward to hearing more about that. I mentioned Colonel Carlos Peña Gonçalves in my opening remarks, obviously. He's now an advisor of the National Authority of Medicines and Health Products, or Infarmed, in Portugal. Previously, during his military career, ran Portugal's biodefense laboratory. And thank you for joining us. Dr. Florica Fink-Huijer is the Director General, known to many in the room, Department of the Health Emergency Preparedness and Response Authority, or HERA, at the European Commission. Ibrahima Sosefal is now the new CEO of Institut Pasteur Dakar, and formerly Assistant Director General at WHO for emergencies, with vast experience in responding to emergencies. And right now, CEPI and IPD are beginning to engage on a partnership related to the Rift Valley fever outbreak, and perhaps we can hear an update on that, which I know will be of great interest to people. And then Precious Matsoso is probably known to everybody in the room, is the director now, the director of Health Regulatory Science Platform at WITS Health Consortium, and a lecturer in the Department of Pharmacy and Pharmacology at Witwatersrand in South Africa, but of course was the co-chair of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Body, which drafted the Pandemic Accord, which was adopted at the most recent World Health Assembly. So let's give a hand for our panel. And Precious, actually, if I may, I would like to start with you. Many have hailed the pandemic agreement as a historic achievement when it was adopted in May at the World Health Assembly. And the revised international health regulations have also just entered into force last month. There are still major issues in the negotiations, particularly relating to pathogen access and benefits sharing. And given the marked changes in the environment over the last year, I just wanted to elicit your thoughts on the ongoing negotiations and thoughts about the key remaining hurdles and areas, and any thoughts you might have about how we might bring countries together.
Well, thank you so much, Richard. Good afternoon, everybody. Let me start by acknowledging my co-chair, Ronald Dries, who's sitting in the audience. And maybe let me start by saying that, you know, you started by repeating what has been said about the fact that we made history and the landmark. But I think credit goes to the 124 member states who sent a very positive message and a strong signal that the world is still together. I think that is important because it kind of sets the tone for the PAPS negotiations. But I also wanted to mention that it's not just about PAPS negotiations. We should also recognize that beyond PAPS, we've got multiple other articles that are quite important. And having the pandemic agreement adopted in parallel with the IHR is probably something that we've learned, but it's not new. We have seen over the years, and I think there are these political issues that we never deal with, which I would like to refer to. When we had the HIV/AIDS crisis, we had around the same time the negotiations in WTO for the the Doha Declaration and August 30 decision, and we've seen that again repeated when the PIP framework was negotiated for H5N1 and some of the issues that came up then about access and benefit sharing. The parallel process was actually happening in the Nagoya Protocol negotiations about benefit sharing. We've seen again the repeat, of course, with IHR and the pandemic agreement. So I'm referencing that because these are difficulties that somehow what I describe as spillover effects, in a sense that you have Nagoya negotiations, the CBD, and the language that is brought from those instruments are just transported, and we get that spillover into the pandemic agreement negotiations. And I think you'll see that with the PAPS agreement. So my message is that there are multiple hurdles, hurdles that are at a political level, of course, and I'll say it, and I've said it again, that a PAPS is not a political instrument, it's a technical instrument. And it is for that reason that we need the technical experts in the room to guide the discussions. However, we also need the political oversight. So that's the first way to deal with this. And I'm seeing a wave of actual optimism. Because last week and for the couple of days, there were experts engaging member states to come up with solutions for those identified areas for the creation of the annex and the PAPS instrument. So that's a positive signal. But the second, of course, is the preparatory work. The preparatory work, and I know that when we talk about preparatory work, most of us think about national governments only. I think the world needs to prepare comprehensively. We need the pharmaceutical industry to understand the implications of the provisions that are in the pandemic agreement first, and understand this woven interlinkages of different articles that are interlaced nicely. Because if you look at local production and you go per article, you can see the linkages and the dependence of all these articles when woven together. The second is the industry that deals with logistics and supply management. Because when we talk about logistics and supply, we just talk about the UN, international organization and others, but we leave others who are also in that space, the aviation industry, that moves product across the world. So everybody across the world need to start looking at the pandemic agreement and understanding carefully what it means, what implementation will look like. But of course, beyond that, we need relevant stakeholders. But national governments must start coming up with plans on what domestication of this legal instrument will mean. How are they going to engage Parliament? How are they going to integrate this and start writing national legislation? This should happen. We shouldn't just wait for the signatory process where we must get the threshold of 60 countries before the instrument can come into effect. So those processes must happen parallel to the pathogen access and benefit sharing instrument negotiations. So we shouldn't wait, finish the PAPs, and only start preparatory work thereafter. Preparatory work should also happen in parallel so that we can make a considerable progress. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Precious. Just a quick response. CEPI participated in some of the technical briefings that you mentioned last week, and I would say that we thought it was terrific that the Intergovernmental Working Group was inviting the briefings, because the enabling technology is changing so fast that it needs to be brought into alignment with the political discussions, as you're saying. And I also would just say that we have begun working with some of our partners. One of the articles that we were quite interested in was Article 9, which had the Article 9.5, which called on funders to use their funding agreements for R&D to advance access objectives. And you're right, we don't have to wait for that. We don't have to wait for the entirety to be completed to begin that work. So thank you for underscoring that. Let me, Dr. Fall, come to you now. You, as I said, have just had a vast experience having seen African efforts to respond to health emergencies, both at WHO, now in your new role at Institut Pasteur de Dakar. Africa has made tremendous strides both in working together and developing continental strategies, but also in developing its technical and human resources in just a really impressive way. I want to ask you about first IPD and your vision for what you'll be doing at IPD. If you have a moment to talk about the recent rift outbreak, that might be of topical interest to people. But I'd also be interested in your thoughts about the continental ambitions, which are quite ambitious in terms of achieving self-sufficiency, strategic autonomy in a relatively short time frame. So over to you.
Thank you, Richard, and good afternoon, colleagues. It's a great pleasure to be with my co-panelists here today, but with so many colleagues and friends in the room. I'm happy to see also the Honorable Minister from Sierra Leone, Ishtan Dembi. And, very happy to talk about progress in health security and pandemic preparedness in Africa. And my best witness is Precious, because in March 2015, I was appointed Regional Director for Health Sector and Emergency in WHO for African region in the midst of the Ebola outbreak in West Africa. So I started with a very small team, and in the briefing, my team was presenting me the number of outbreaks in Africa. And the first question I asked them, okay, what have you done with the data? There was no answer. I was, thinking about what needs to be done for preparedness. At the same time, I was getting pressure from my regional director to stop the Ebola outbreak. I told her, we cannot be just firefighters. We need to analyze what has happened in the past. She was telling me, no, Sose, we don't have time to do that. I didn't say anything. I called my friend in Kenya, Cambry, tell them we have a new job to do. We need to map out the risk of outbreak in Africa. So we started doing a study called, risk analysis and mapping of outbreaks in Africa. And we managed to map out all the ecological niche of outbreak and viruses, everything you can think about, including malaria, because we have done it for malaria before with Cambry. So, and at the same time, in June 2015, Precious was Director General of Health in Africa. We organized the first global health security meeting called Health Security Beyond Ebola. And it was exactly during that meeting that we proposed a joint external evaluation of IHR, because WHO was doing self-assessment with countries. And we had the global health security agenda with the US. WHO and the US, they couldn't talk to each other. It's from that meeting that we proposed a joint external evaluation of IHR. And the first GE happened in Tanzania in 2016. It was presented at the parliament, because we realized that IHR was just a technical tool before the Ebola outbreak, but now we wanted to go at political level. And the year after, myself, I presented the first regional strategy on health security and emergency in Africa, in Addis Ababa, approved by all ministers. And if you look at the GE now, it's the gold standard. We have close to 190 countries conducting GE in Africa. And the risk assessment we did at country level also to have a risk profiling. So using the risk assessment and GE, you are able to do evidence-based preparedness, but also to develop evidence-based health security plan. And we were able to expand capacity because we had a baseline of more than 3,000 young Africans we recruited in Guinea, Sierra Leone, Liberia. They are all international experts now. That's why when the COVID pandemic started, I was getting interviewed in Geneva asking me what is going to happen in Africa. And I was always saying the best epidemiologists are in Africa. They thought I was joking because I know them, I've worked with them, and we were deploying them from one country to another. And if you just, in terms of progress, only in 2017 in Congo, to confirm Ebola outbreak, we were obliged to send sample outside the country, sometimes outside Africa. And now they have a BSL-3 lab in Kinshasa and Goma. And in 2018, we had 14 mobile laboratories deployed on the ground, managed by people from Institut Pasteur Dakar and Congo, ENRB. And so we have made so much progress. And the work Institut Pasteur is doing right now is in line with what I'm saying. And we are working, for example, with 12 African countries, West Africa, around what we call the 4S, syndromic, surveillance sentinel system, but also combining genomic surveillance into this. And that's why when the Rift Valley fever outbreak started in Senegal, very quickly we were able to detect it and to do the genomic sequencing. And you will be surprised because the first Rift Valley fever outbreak in Senegal happened in 1987 because of, irrigation and intensive agriculture. And we were having small outbreaks after that. But what is new is, since 2020, Institut Pasteur was able to detect a new lineage of, Rift Valley fever linked to South Africa, can you imagine? Because of agribusiness, we are importing so many animals from South Africa. And, but something interesting also in terms of vector, because Institut Pasteur is one of the few institutions with full capacity for, vector-borne diseases, from research to intervention. We were able to sample very quickly 11,000 mosquitoes from Saint-Louis to Matam. And what is happening in Saint-Louis is completely different in terms of vector to Matam, meaning you need to adapt your intervention based on the reality on the ground. And at political level, 2 weeks ago, I was called by the president himself to attend the National Health Security meeting he's chairing every week because of Rift Valley fever, to tell you that the political commitment is very high. The president was there, the Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, and when the Minister of Health presented the budget, they told him it's too small. You need to think bigger than this because this is a multi-sectoral approach. And we are working using the One Health approach to respond to this outbreak. And I use this opportunity to tell them the risk is not only about Rift Valley fever. We have multiple risks, and we need to be ready for all kinds of outbreaks and health emergencies. And Institut Pasteur also working with CEPI, AID, and others, has invested a lot in production of vaccine, but also rapid diagnostic tests. For example, the first rapid diagnostic test for measles will be produced by Institut Pasteur in a few months. And we are working on other neglected tropical diseases, outbreak-prone diseases. And with tech transfer, we are working also a lot on many, vaccine like for Ebola, for Marburg, to make sure that in Africa we have the capacity to scale up when we have a new outbreak. I think this is important for us. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Ibrahim, the RIF story it brings so many important themes together. I mean, you mentioned One Health, you mentioned the linkage of the new lineage to disease that had been seen in South Africa. Yeah. You mentioned, I mean, it's in animals and in humans now. It's tremendously impressive to hear about the way in which science is being brought, into the response and is really inspiring. So I say congratulations. It's terrific to hear. Let us hope that we could quickly bring the outbreak under control. Florica, if I may come to you. HERA was created, obviously, to strengthen Europe's health security, but you also have established partnerships in the Global South, and you're also working on issues relating to financing for health security. Would be sustainable financing. Would be very keen to hear more from you about the partnerships in the Global South and how you see those playing into HERA's mission and go from there.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Richard, for having me, and also good afternoon. I think it fits very much after what Ibrahim was explaining. It's true, we have at our origin a mandate to ensure that in Europe we have the life-saving, let's say, countermeasures, vaccines, diagnostics, therapeutics, and the medicine available. That was the origin why HERA was created as a reaction to COVID-19. But it is obvious that we are not acting as an island, nor, and I would like to be very clear here, if you go on bilateralism, unilateralism, or transactionalism, doesn't even exist that word, but you know what I mean. It's a slippery slope if you act in health emergency and health security. And I can say that Europe is not going along that path. Neither Europe, nor the European Commission, nor DG HERA. We are having put forward a strategy, we call it the MCM strategy, which is really setting out our path for the next 5 years, according to the threats that we see, not just in Europe, but in general, in global, because it is a global threat. And alongside this MCM strategy, there's a very strong, of course, international path. You also had our President von der Leyen, just recently said that we do know that Europe is not immune to any pandemic. It could come within Europe or it come from outside Europe, but we will have to act together. But if you want to act together, you need trust, collaboration, but you also need innovation. And logically, we are going on 3 layers, and it's a bit a no-brainer, but the first part is really collaboration and cooperation. The other one is research and development and their tech transfers, and also working together on innovation together. And then the last one is obviously local production capacities. And I'm actually quite proud that we are active on all 3 layers. Not everybody is on all 3 layers, and I think this is quite an ambition, but it is the most logical way to go forward. If you allow, I would like to elaborate a little bit on these 3 layers. The first layer is, as I said, creating a network with not only like-minded partners, but partners where we think it can be bilateral, but it can also be regional organizations, where we think it is better to have surveillance, to have information bundled up in a network. And that is where we have worked very much with with Japan, with Canada, with Korea, with regional organizations, African CDC, obviously. We are going now for PAO. We're working with you. We're working with many, and we would like to even elaborate more on that network. I think that network already allowed us to, for instance, be quicker when Mpox came up more as an epidemic. And I think this helped us to act in a joined-up fashion. Another example why that worked is surveillance. Logically, the starting point of everything is being aware of what's happening, not just in your own area, but also elsewhere in the world. And that, let me explain that with GlovaCon. I have to always say this, we all use these acronyms, but it's the Global Consortium for Wastewater and Environmental Surveillance for Public Health. It was launched in 24 by DG HERA, and it has really been taken up, first in Europe and then globally now. We are really trying to connect and fund that we have surveillance of these wastewater systems in the biggest ports, in the biggest hubs, like airports. So this is a very concrete way of networking around surveillance systems. I'm not saying that it's easy, because there are many questions behind, but it is a network approach that we think would be very good. We will also have, for instance, now as a very concrete example of GlovaCon, is we will have the EU-African Union Summit upcoming, and we use UNEP, so United Nations Environmental Program, in order to help us implement with Kenya, with African CDC, and I think with South Africa, to have this embedded in the infrastructure. So that's a very concrete example of networking. We also have that with the, also with African CDC PGI for the African Pathogen Genomic Initiative, where it's a bit what Precious was starting the genomic sequencing, but there we have to also look at outbreaks, early detections. So that is just one example. We have many other tools to support the networks, like the vaccine tool. But as we are here with CEPI, I would also like to pay tribute, because we are so far as a significant funder giving you 280 million. That's enormous, and we're proud of that. But I have to pay tribute to you, because you leveraged that up with 800, and then it's almost like 300% more. So this is also a combination of networking. We give seed funding, which is a significant seed funding, but you manage to leverage it up. So that's quite important, and that helps to spread then possibilities and networking. We also know that we have to look for, as I said, and that's where CEPI comes in, is research and development networks. It's again networks sharing that. And with the CEPI initiative I just mentioned, we also can go on spreading technology transfers in what is it, 160 countries in Africa in particular. So that's another form of joined up action. I think this is very important to see that you cannot be researching on your own. You don't know where the disease might come and occur, and you need to have the knowledge on the ground as well. So joined up research and innovation, super important. And that logically then brings you to the third layer, which is supporting local manufacturing. And I think that is an area where I have to pay tribute here to my colleagues from DG INPA, the International Partnership DG, because they are the ones driving it. We are working together with them, but funding comes from them very much. If COVID has shown us there's a supply chain issue. So I know that there are different views. There are those who would say it's sufficient if someone is able to produce the vaccine or the therapeutics and then scale it up and distribute. It is possible. We believe our experience from COVID with the supply chain issues is it is better to go for local manufacturing. It's also a question of acting earlier, and of course, containing things earlier. It's also, in my view, an issue of solidarity. But also it helps both ways. It's bi-directional. Yeah? It's not just in one or the other way. You might need the scale capacity also back home. So it's both ways. But to do so is, of course, complex. But we look for ourselves. When we look at ourselves, we go more on, can be local manufacturing, but it doesn't have to be that you already produce. It can be reservation contracts. That's what we in Europe do quite a lot. It's a bit more cost efficient. But it depends on the MCM and it depends on the threat scenario. For others, like you will talk after me, biological threats, we of course have stockpiles, so that's different. But here, let me, when we go outside with our partners, I would mention the MAF Plus initiative, which is supporting manufacturing access to vaccines, medicines and health technology in Africa. And that is a dedicated initiative that was launched in 21, so around COVID already. And this is really led by our colleagues in DG INPA. But we team up also with Team Up Europe and Team Africa. So again, it's a network to see what we can do. And the idea here is we are also working with our investment bank because they de-risk and incentivize that the funding goes locally. And then at the same time, our partners in Africa will tell where to go best and with what type of medicine. I think that's extremely important. And I think Madiba in Senegal is a good example of a very concrete outcome of local capacity, manufacturing capacity, which has been put up. We had just last week, we had an event where I think we gave under the MAF Plus for the manufacturing capacity site in Kigali, in Rwanda. We get, I think, 35% in grants and the rest in loans, or the other way around, I don't remember, but it was scaling up. Why? Yes, we were very ambitious, perhaps a bit over-ambitious with Kigali, but now they are continuing on the infrastructure, on the clinical, preclinical trial works, on the commercialization of all of this. And there is a spillover, which we should also not underestimate. Very high-skilled workforce is being trained. You have growth in the country as well, and you have, side effects which perhaps are not only linked to the production of vaccines, which is, I think, extremely important, and you are safer in your value chains or in your supply chains. So that's a little bit the three layers where we are active, and there are many more examples, but I wanted to give you a little bit of feeling that it is not just nice words, it is really something very concrete. There's a lot of funding behind, but a lot of people behind who are thinking it through and who believe in it and then join forces together. And that's, I think, one of the trust-building collaboration and innovation part that I think is needed. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Flora. Just wanted to pick up very quickly on the last example that you mentioned, the work on the facility in Kigali, and CEPI has been providing support for that facility, working closely with Europe. I think one of the things that I've been very impressed by is the way that Europe can bring different institutions, different instruments together in these creative solutions, and has invited partners like CEPI to come and play a part that we can contribute as well. So it is impressive. It's very complex, but the rewards when you have something tangible like Madiba or the facility in Kigali, it makes it all really worthwhile. Carlos, let me come to you. Want to just say historically, military organizations have been concerned about biodefense threats, but those threats haven't necessarily overlapped with global health concerns historically. I think that's changing now, and would welcome your thoughts on opportunities that you see for alliances or partnerships to build on the themes that Florica was describing, alliances and partnerships between the traditional security community and the global health community to address infectious disease threats, where you see opportunities, where if you see gaps or if you see challenges that need to be overcome, would also welcome your thoughts on that.
Thank you very much. So it will be not like a completely different talk now, but it will be a bit a different focus, and it's a perspective, of course, from biodefense that I would like to bring here. I should say I would always, my dream would be always that put these two communities together, because I'm for a long time being worried about problems with biological agents that could create problems to us by deliberate use of them. And so I think the opportunity is coming, as you say, to join efforts here. But let me tell you that for the biosecurity community, or at least for myself, the pandemic threat is not something like this lurking and then somehow, somewhere will show up as a pandemic problem. It's a threat that is evolving very rapidly and with a very high degree of uncertainty. We don't know where it's going. And why is that? That basically it's because of something that is called, and I'll go direct to the point, something that we call synthetic biology. I think everybody knows what I'm talking here about. And why is that important from the biosecurity point of view? It's because of at least two things. Is that information to construct new bugs, new microbes, new pathogens, it's freely available. So almost anybody in most places can have access to this information, to the basic information that enables you to do that. That there is a second level of lowering barriers or accessibility, if you want, that is also worrying, is that actually the equipment and the tools that you need to do that are not very sophisticated any longer, are at the level of a medium academic lab, are at the level of a small startup biotech. And that means that there's thousands of people that actually could do that. They will not be interested in doing that. The majority of them, they are doing it for good. Biotech is a good thing. It will be the next revolution that will push up civilization like, I don't know, the steam and the gas did. It will be going through our society, improving our quality of life, but have this problem that of a malicious use of these technologies. And these technologies, as has been said, they are evolving at all time with high speed and with very little oversight. And that's our worry, okay? So, of course, we have cross with ideas and scenarios, apocalyptic scenarios of using of these new bugs and super virus that will infect all humanity and eventually will be an existential threat. I'm not saying this is impossible, but I won't say it's likely. But what is more plausible is that something like a bug that is, for instance, resistant to many antibiotics is constructed very easily, and that this can be spread. And not spread maybe worldwide, but in a small place, or in given targets like hospitals, schools, where people that is more susceptible to these things could get sick and eventually die. So that's our worry. Our worry is, so this is possible now, and why is it getting even worse? So now I'll say something that everybody says nowadays, it's because of artificial intelligence. Okay? So we have this very good tool that artificial intelligence will bring in many aspects of our lives. But now you can use artificial intelligence, to generate toxins that we don't even know, to generate virulence factors that we never thought of. And this brings us to a situation where if this happens, so it will be a lot of confusion. So is this something you think? It's a debate. Well, it's fabricated, it's not fabricated. We'll go into this ambiguity that is typical of what we call hybrid actions. Okay? So we enter this field that you really don't know what's going on, of uncertainty. So I don't want to be very, 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 strong on this. But of course there is hope, there is hope. So the hope is, there is some hope. But the hope is that you need to have a mindset to these things that is, we have to know what is going on. But it's not by forbidding activity, it's not by pushing down research, it's not by trying to control innovation. It's innovation that is bringing this, but it will be biotech and innovation that will give us the tools to control this. So this is an important message that I would like to deliver, because otherwise we're going back. If you try to forbid, it will always go through our grids, okay? So what we have to be as state actors, as initiatives, multilateral initiatives like CEPI, is to be ahead of the curve. And being ahead of this curve is something like the mission, this 100 days mission. If people is trying to do this and they know that it's possible that in 100 days this will be taken care of, this by itself in military or strategic thinking is a deterrence. Okay. It's very important that there's a deterrence tool to do this. But of course, when another mission is good, it will give us some medical countermeasures. But we need to work on other levels. We need to work at the levels of the detection systems, because normally we detect pathogens by now. The normal thing now is analyzing DNA and comparing to DNA that you already know exists. That's the way you identify it. But now you have to be prepared to isolate that DNA that you have never seen and try to guess if this is a good thing or bad thing. Put it in other words, you have to have systems, analytics that can predict pathogenicity, that can predict pathogenic power from DNA. This is one of the things that you have to work with. The other thing we have to work also with is on, the word regulation normally sounds a bit, stiff. But you really need to have more transparency in this sector. You really need to have more sharing of information, so the stakeholders know, including the regulatory agencies, what's going on. What's going on in these little biotechs that are hundreds of them. Can you get a system where this information is shared and you can build up trust on what's going on? So that is an important step. But even more important than that, I would say, is to build up systems that allow us to monitor this type of activity. And this can be done, I wouldn't say again with artificial intelligence, but with tools, surveillance tools that can go in to the net and see what's going on. What are the DNA sequences that are being asked to be sequenced? What are the laboratories that are asking different materials that are critical? So this type of information is there, is there, and we have to be able to capture it for our own security. So I'll leave it
Great.
at that
Thank you.
point.
Talking about the engagement with the security community and military militaries that are concerned about deliberately constructed threats potentially introduces a new partner. Naina, I want to come to you on the theme of new partners and expanding the set of partners. And in addition to worrying about some of the security threats and the deliberate applications, AVPN has worked to build a network of philanthropists and social investors, particularly around investing in health. And I would be very interested to get your thoughts about how philanthropies, particularly globally, can be brought to catalyze some of the innovation that Carlos was referencing that we need. And what role do you see philanthropies and philanthropists playing in bridging to the kinds of financing resources that Florica was mentioning in some of her comments?
No, thank you, and thank you for having me here, because it's interesting, right? In this whole group, philanthropy is philanthropy that hasn't traditionally funded health is sort of the wild card. And, based on what all of you have said, I think that's the card that's needed the most. Because if we are to get a 100-day response in place to meet some of the security threats that Carlos talked about, you need to be able to fund innovation, you need to be able to fund research, you need to be able to go beyond the funding as usual, which is what a lot of the more established players do and are doing really well. But I think if the pandemic has really taught us anything, it means that we need to be prepared. We need to be prepared with urgency, but we also need to have capital that is patient, that will support innovation, that is not going to look at just supporting programs or program effectiveness, but is really going to help take the risk to come up with what the solutions are to problems that we don't even know of yet, or threats that Carlos was mentioning that will come through technology that we aren't even clear about yet. So how do we actually get to support that catalytically? And that's where new philanthropy comes in, and that's where a lot of the newer philanthropists who want to make a difference or who want to sort of establish their legacy, they actually come in, and they need to be more in these rooms. I think some of the information that you talked about and that you're sharing with technical experts needs also to be shared with a newer generation of philanthropists who aren't really sure what they should fund and how they should fund. And I think we tend not to take that into account very often. And that's where I think, you talked a lot, Florica, about networks. That's where networks come in. And AVPN is a funders network. We're a network of more than 700 organizations that actually look at funding in Asia. And part of what we have tried to do is really focus attention on areas that they have not traditionally funded. So you see Asian philanthropists traditionally fund access to care, they fund programs, but they don't tend to fund innovation, and they definitely don't tend to fund R&D. So how do you actually, focus that attention on funding R&D and funding innovation and being kind of catalytic in their funding so that you can have multilateral institutions actually be de-risked in funding larger scale innovations. And that's what we have tried to really do in terms of looking at bringing together innovative financing by trying to bring in new generation of philanthropists who haven't traditionally funded either research or funded looking at developing new vaccines, or also looking at developing local manufacturing capabilities. And you know, you see, we have the health minister of Indonesia here. One of the things that they're trying to do very much is build up local manufacturing facilities and really looking at seeing how they can raise local funding to be that bridge financing facility that will actually help local manufacturing take up. And that's I think, something that is key. So, you know, based on what all of you have really talked about, I think it's what philanthropy can do is really kind of provide that immediate financing, provide the de-risking facility, provide the innovation that is needed. But that will only happen if you have more philanthropists in the room who understand the urgency that is needed and therefore put the capital where it's required the most.
What recommendations would you give to the folks in the room to sort of engage those philanthropists and make them or help them see the value of funding innovation or funding R&D? Are you finding strategies that in that particular area that are working?
We are. I think for us, it's a lot about spreading awareness that philanthropists can and do have a role to play. It's also building the bridges between philanthropists and local government to see where they can come in and partner with local government. I think, you know, you're also realizing with ODA drying up, it's important for local philanthropists to come in and also play a part. I think some Asian governments have realized that this is where some of that capital will come in. I think large multilateral financial institutions like the ADB are also keen to attract private sector funding in Asia, and that's also playing a role. But part of it has to be about sort of lowering the information barriers that actually exist, where philanthropists who traditionally have not funded in health are you know, sort of able to feel that they can get an understanding and they can actually learn a little bit more about where the gaps are and where they need to step in.
Great. Thank you. We've got about 20 minutes to take questions from the audience. And I know I've been advised that there are a couple of questions that people already have. I'm going to, just to get things going, I'm going to ask Anne Vermouche from at Gavi, the Chief Vaccine Programs and Markets Office. I think I was advised you had a comment.
She's there.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I didn't see where you are.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Richard, thank you for organizing the panel. So yes, I'm from Gavi, and as you know, Gavi works very closely with CEPI, and we absolutely 100% support the 100 days mission. And at Gavi also, of course, we want to play our part. When there are outbreaks, we always are ready to make available vaccines, well, at speed. We also want to incentivize markets where that is needed to make relevant vaccines available. But my question to the panel is specifically related to these pathogens that are outbreak prone and that often have very difficult commercial markets. Like if you take the example that was already discussed, like Ebola Marburg, for instance. So my question really is, there's one thing that we, with the 100-day mission, can absolutely ensure to accelerate development and make sure that those vaccines are not only a promise, but are really developed. But how do we answer also the question of equitable access, the question of equity? And my question to the panel is, what more can be done to make sure that whenever such a new epidemic happens, that the vaccines are not only developed, but are available wherever they are needed? So any new ideas that the panelists have would absolutely be welcome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ibrahima?
No, thank you. This is a very important question, and as Pastor, we always talk about it, because there are areas where we can invest and get return on investment very easily. You know, and areas where you cannot get return on investment, but this is about saving life. Everything related to outbreak, you know, need to be addressed. On, if you take diseases like Ebola, like Marburg, they are mainly happening in Africa. If you don't invest into R&D to make sure that we have the vaccine in Africa, nobody will do it for us. That's why we balance the benefit and public health impact, because our main goal is to protect and save life. That's why, as part of pandemic preparedness, outbreak preparedness, using existing funding mechanism like Gavi, like the pandemic funds, like the pandemic fund, we need to make sure that we have, funding from those mechanisms in a coordinated manner, but also making sure that we have domestic and continental funding for, vaccines that are only going to, to be distributed to a limited number of people, but that will have big public health impact. And if we don't do it, the economic and social consequences will be even bigger than anything we can gain in terms of economics.
Can I just, coming a bit to your question of collaboration between civilian and military systems. I think on that area, to be honest, I think the military could help. What we call the last mile logistics, actually getting vaccines to people. So there's a lot of experts in the military area that work on deployment of many things to particular sites and anywhere in the world. So there's a kind of a tradition of theory of how you do this, and could be a good area where collaboration between the military sector and the civilian sector is good. I can tell you that from my own experience, because I was responsible for the rollout of the vaccination in Portugal for COVID-19 vaccination for a while. And at that point, the government decided that the military should take care of the rollout. And what we brought to the system is a novel model of operation, a novel model of planning operations. And we merged this into the usual methodologies and procedures of the health system. And what came out of that, it was much more efficiency and maximizing performance. So if you don't have reservations, it's the health system, as you know, health professionals, they are very aware of their own, space of work, and they very easily feel invaded. But if you don't have that mental reservation and you are receptive to new ideas, it works. I can tell you by experience, it works.
Precious?
Well, maybe just a few observations. I mean, firstly, we have these provisions, and like I said, they're interlinked, and maybe what we could start, given your area of work, is to start planning for the global supply chain network on how it will operate in future, and put the building blocks together. But I'd also like to use the CEPI 100 days mission. And maybe if you could do, we don't have to wait for a disaster to happen or an outbreak to become a pandemic. Perhaps use the 100-day mission and do simulation exercises and test some of these articles and see how these are interlinked. Because of course, we're left with 7 months before the assembly makes a decision about PAPs, and we still need to have the instruments to be deposited, and we need a threshold of 60, and by the time the pandemic agreement come into force, we still have parliamentary processes for ratification and so on. Now, we don't have to wait that long. Let's start testing some of these provisions. And I like the 100 days mission. And of course, when what gets measured, get done. Yeah. And maybe let's use your model. Of course, there are others. We have the 717, that has been tried by others, but this simulation, whether they're using different instruments and different, tools that have been developed, may be one way to go.
One of the things that we often talk about with respect to the 100 Days mission is that there are two aspects to it. There's a preparedness aspect, which is what we can do now to position ourselves to be ready to respond, and there's a readiness aspect, which is what happens when you're against the clock, and can you actually make the processes move quickly, because speed is very closely related to equity. I mean, and I'll just conclude that reflection by saying one of my favorite sayings, I think this was, it gets variously attributed, but it's usually to some general somewhere who says that amateurs talk about strategy and professionals talk about logistics. And being prepared to execute with logistics is one of the very important drivers, and testing ourselves against the clock, like you say, Precious, is really important. And seeking opportunities in every response or every engagement that we have to make sure that we actually have the operational and logistical problems sorted out makes a huge difference, and will make a huge difference. I'm advised that Dana McLaughlin from IFRC has a comment or question.
On. All right. Hi, everyone. Dana McLaughlin. I'm here representing the International Federation of the Red Cross. You all have mentioned how outbreaks begin with small signals. And I think one thing we've seen over the past couple years, certainly since the pandemic, is great investments in our ability to quickly detect those signals. I think some of the conversations earlier today have made reference to the need to bring a lot of those signals together and to use that as a powerful tool for integrated surveillance. And so my question today is, as we think about preparing for disease X, or even counting backwards in order to prepare ourselves to be able to meet the 100-day mission, what do you see the role of community-based surveillance being in accelerating our ability to support early detection, rapid response, and eventually the development of medical countermeasures? And ultimately, there's significant investments have been made in genomic sequencing. You mentioned wastewater surveillance. Certainly, decades of investments in syndromic surveillance. But how can community insights, social behavior data, and qualitative evidence that are in the communities where we're trying to reach these outbreaks can be used to accelerate that pipeline towards the 100-day mission, and ultimately to keep us ahead of the curve, which Carlos mentioned? Really great question.
Florica, and then I'm Ibrahim. It looked like everybody was eager to jump in. But
no, actually, my answer is partly short on yours, but perhaps longer on what was asked before. Because, of course, it should be also community-based data. That is, I think, a no-brainer. And you do have that also very much in, you have environmental data normally, which you could bring in, and as it is often linked, if you take vector-borne diseases, very much linked to the degradation of the environment or not. So citizen science, community-based, bottom-up information should be part, because otherwise we would miss out and have blind spots. That's easier said than done, because you need funding, you need also data sets, you need also the possibility to capture that. And then comes, of course, questions like with whom do you share? Where's the data stored? With whom it is exchanged? And I can say that because we started on a more macro level with a wastewater surveillance system on the airports, on the ports, which should be logically complemented by community-based or button-down data. And there perhaps philanthropists could come in. But there are legal constraints, there are regulatory issues, there's a ton of issues why people would say, it's complicated. Because whatever you capture as data is not just about necessarily about a pathogen. But even if we know that, it shouldn't withhold us from starting at either this level or that level. But what I think is, and that's what you said also, we have to look in a much more holistic, more integrated approach. And there I wanted to come back on what was asked in the first place. Going and asking what is the last mile means you have to start the other way around. If we in HERA, we are an emergency response service, so people say, will you have it? And I always say, that depends on having had the funding, the right instincts, the right data, the right surveillance data, in order to start on the pipeline early on. And that is a long pipeline. Even with the 100-day mission, yes, fine, we have a whole series of networks now for pandemic, for vaccines, for laboratories, for, in the future, therapeutics and diagnostics. And we are aware that we need to combine that. And I'm pretty sure that we would be able, whether it's intentional, accidentally, or natural, we might be able to have something in a at least shorter way than normally a vaccine or a therapeutics or antiviral has to be produced. But it starts by being enabled to go the whole pipeline. And the whole pipeline means you go also on sometimes pathogens that are non-commercially viable. Most of the time they are not commercially viable. And that is the issue. And therefore, very great to hear philanthropists coming into also the arena, because funding is shrinking, because precisely of security risk. We go also on the securities. We massively go into CEPI and civil military cooperation. That is important for us in Europe, but we should not therefore then let go on the other pathogens, nor on antimicrobial resistance. So we have to go on different strands together. That's costly. But if you not look at it as a pipeline approach, including the communities, starting at the surveillance and having a response, it's very challenging. I don't want to pour cold water here, but it's complicated. But it doesn't mean you start on the different angles, and that we cannot do only by joining forces. Nobody can do this alone, I'm sorry to say.
Ibrahim, I'm going to come to you quickly, but Laina, did you want to come in?
No, I completely agree with what Florica has said. I mean, this is why philanthropy is really important, because, it's only when you get local philanthropy involved, to your point, you need to get community-based organizations, you need to get those who are working on the ground, who kind of see the first signals, to be able to report it, to be able to be funded, to actually, that kind of funding will only come from philanthropists. And that kind of funding has to be multi-year, it has to be trust-based, it has to be sort of listening to those that are working closest to communities on the ground, who actually see changes that are happening and can then report back, starting at local government, which then moves up. So it's a whole cycle that needs to be put into place, and that does not happen overnight. It needs to be funded, as you said, that those are the things that's where funding dries up, and that's where we need to actually have a whole chain or a whole value chain in place.
Fantastic. Ibrahim.
Thank you. Just want to come back to the importance of community-based surveillance. In Africa, we use a strategy called integrated disease surveillance and response, where you have what we call events-based surveillance and health facility-based surveillance. And if you miss the community-level surveillance, clearly you'll be very late. And we have developed a concept of first detector, first responder in Institut Pasteur, meaning that the community should be the first one to detect and the first one to respond. If you take Rift Valley fever again, for example, the first signal you will get is abortion from the cattle and many animals dying. This is your first alert. It can only come from the community, even not from the health sector. And, during the COVID pandemic, I was being interviewed by a country because they were doing their post-COVID assessment. In Europe, I told them your main problem is your epidemiologists are sitting in laboratory and hospital, waiting for the virus. Of course, you cannot stop an outbreak if you are sitting in a hospital and in laboratories because everything is happening in the population. But this is understandable because of the level of development in Europe. You don't have community-based approach to anything. It's very individualized.
No, we do on a lot.
I mean, at population level, I mean. I'm not talking about political level. If you want really to be able to detect outbreak at the community level, it's a completely different system. People are not living like that anymore in Europe because of development. But in Africa, everything should be community-based. If you want to be successful, in any development project, in any surveillance project, it's really important. Thank you.
Precious, we've just been having a conversation about the importance of communities in surveillance and response, and I suspect you might have some thoughts about that. Would you like to add anything? We've been talking about, the question came from IFRC, from Dana, about how do we engage communities in our surveillance efforts, and how do we keep communities engaged in the response efforts? I'll give you the last word.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry about the disruption. Outbreaks start as, in communities and end in communities. And we've seen in a number of cases why it's important to engage communities. And I always differentiate between communities and civil society formations, because those are vehicles to reach communities. And I think you need both. You need those formations to be on the ground so that they can educate the communities and also engage them. But you also, for those who understand the rural arrangements, people in villages, they've got chiefs, and the engagements sometimes work well if you use chiefs to convene them and to, pass on messages through those structures. But you also have other formations, religious groups, for instance, in Muslim communities or any other, Christian communities or any other religious groups. They convene, and you can use those vehicles and those structures to reach out to communities. So there are different arrangements on how best to reach communities. And in Africa in particular, you've got what we call social clubs, and I can talk about in the South African context. Those are social structures that are used for survival. They are used to support. It's actually a support system. So even those structures, can be considered. So use the best vehicles available to reach out to communities. But I think we need to also consider the much formalized structures to provide that kind of support. Thank you.
Great.
And sorry, 1 minute. I'm sorry. I wanted to say that I know that all of us talk about pubs, and we need to think carefully on how we're going to engage professionals, because they need to understand once there's a pathogen, whether it has been characterized, how does it spread and so on. So you need the health providers on your side. You need to engage them. They need to be part of the conversation. You need to have researchers, because they also have interest. You need epidemiologists, meaning don't work on the instrument and you don't bring all of them on board. You need industry, because if they do R&D, they need to understand what the implications are for them. And those provisions that are in Article 12, you need a breakdown. What does it mean to have set-asides? What does it mean to have real, time protection in the manner in which it's designed? What does it mean for those who are in the logistics industry? But also government has these public-private partnerships. the regional arrangements. What do the regional structures understand? So I would appeal actually for those who do catalytic work, including catalytic funding, that we need to put structures that can start putting building blocks even before we finalize the PAPs, so that the engagement can start now. And people have a better understanding of what those provisions are. And they can also help us shape the content, because at the moment, you know, it's only those negotiators in the room, and I don't think it's enough. We also need those outside the room with knowledge, with understanding, with experience to inform the discussions. Thank you very much.
Great. And that's a great place to wrap up, Precious, the appeal to widen the conversation. And I think that actually ends up being the theme, probably, that sort of wove the panel together. I'm advised to invite everyone to the opening night celebrations, I believe at the pavilion, I think, which is right out here. That will start at 6 p.m. For people. With that, let us adjourn, but first let's give the panel a final round of applause. Great. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Oh, my goodness.
So much for this.